Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into something that's felt um, increasingly strange lately.
Yeah.
How the conversation around really fundamental things like climate change, energy, public health, it just seems to have shifted so dramatically
Yeah.
compared to just a few years ago anyway. It's almost disorienting, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And the source material we're digging into today, it's from this really insightful TEDx talk, and it zeroes in on this exact paradox. Uses a pretty striking analogy, actually.
Right, the space trip idea. Like, imagine you blasted off for, what, 2 years?
Yeah, something like that.
And you left Earth totally convinced the world was finally, getting its act together on these huge global problems.
And you'd have good reasons to think that based on the source.
Exactly, based on lessons everyone seemed to have learned from, well, climate warnings, the science, and definitely the pandemic, that shared experience.
And the material we've got suggests that around 2020, the momentum, the public talk, policy promises, they genuinely pointed towards some pretty big changes. So our mission here in this deep dive is to look at these two wildly different stories the source presents, examine the evidence it uses to, well, pick one apart, and try to get what the source thinks is fundamentally at stake for you in all this confusion.
Okay, so let's rewind to that moment the source describes. Back around 2020, it really did feel like there was this strong, almost collective global push to fundamentally reshape, our economies and how we make things.
It did. The sources give concrete examples. You had the Green Deal in Europe, which was framed as, look, this is essential. We need to adapt the continent's economy for the future.
Yeah. And even in the U.S., the source points out there was this gigantic plan for ecological reconversion happening. Maybe they didn't slap the green label on it everywhere,
Right.
but the intent seems clear. And those warnings from young climate activists, they felt like they were finally cutting through, being taken seriously.
And the source argues that COVID, the pandemic experience, really just reinforced all that sense of urgency, our shared vulnerability. It hammered home how much we rely on nature, how vulnerable we are to it. Showed us plain as day how vital, strong public health care is. Doctors, nurses as heroes, all that. And as the source notes, real promises were made, like we'll make the healthcare system stronger, more solid. Plus, it underlined how important international cooperation is just for our own self-interest, really.
It honestly felt like a consensus moment, a turning point where changing course wasn't just like a nice idea, but seemed like the only logical path. Everyone agreed, right?
Which brings us smack into the paradox the source identifies. You come back from that hypothetical space trip,
Yeah.
full of optimism, expecting progress, only to find the exact opposite seems to have happened.
The source paints it as almost a nightmare scenario. You land, and suddenly you find what climate change denialists in government positions in lots of countries, terms like ecological transition, Green Deal, things that seem like the future are now treated like bad words, practically.
And it gets worse. The source observes public healthcare systems weakened practically everywhere.
Wow.
You find health ministers in, major scientific powers questioning vaccinations, international cooperation. At decades-low levels, nations looking at each other with suspicion again.
And on top of that,
Some states are pushing forward with gigantic rearmament plans.
it sounds completely counterintuitive, but the source is saying, look, this is the baffling reality we return to.
Yep.
The world took this sharp U-turn away from where it seemed headed. That's the core puzzle, the paradox.
And it's especially jarring when you think back, the source reminds us that when this imaginary trip started, there was widespread agreement on the problems, the biosphere, human civilization facing multiple issues, and backed by what the source calls overwhelming scientific evidence.
Right. The source lists them out, things we all knew. Earth is warming, we know why.
Yep.
Biodiversity is collapsing, we're in the 6th mass extinction. That's not really debated in science.
And pollution. We've learned it's not just, smoke from factories. It's taken these weird, insidious forms like microplastics everywhere, even inside us.
So the contrast is just incredible. All that awareness, all that evidence the source talks about. And somehow, upon returning, it's like that awareness just suddenly vanished. The whole public story flipped.
And the source describes this new narrative, the dominant counter story. And it's designed to be super simple, easy to swallow, and crucially scary.
Okay, what does it sound like, according to the source?
It's basically this. They, the shadow, they want to steal your freedom. You're going to be forced to change everything. Your car, your heating, your whole way of life. You might lose your job.
Right, the fear factor.
Exactly. And the message is clear. Your life will become a nightmare. So what do? You must oppose this. Simple.
And the source explains why this simple, scary story works so well.
It does. Several reasons. First, it's simple, no effort needed. Second, fear. It scares you, which makes you feel you have to believe it, because who wants that trouble? Third, it's weirdly reassuring you can live peacefully. Just ignore all this complicated change stuff. Very appealing.
Makes sense.
And finally, it spreads like wildfire, especially online. Often mixes in conspiracy stuff, powerful elites out to make your life hell, that kind of thing.
But the source is really clear on this point, isn't it?
Absolutely emphatic. This new message has no adherence to reality and even less a scientific basis. It's a story totally disconnected from the evidence we were just discussing.
Okay, so let's challenge it with some data, like the source does. The electric car example is a good one.
It's a great one. The source brings in this personal story, someone consulting on sustainable mobility back in 2021, 2022. And back then, electric mobility wasn't even really debated. It was seen as absolutely solid, a given. The whole focus was practical. How do we manage this huge, complex industrial shift for the European car industry? Because the change was seen as inevitable.
Wow. Fast forward to now.
Totally different narrative, right? Now, the electric car is evil. It makes us slaves to Chinese batteries. It involves gigantic mining extractions that devastate the environment.
Okay, but the source tackles that mining claim head on with data, right? That's the eye-opening part.
It really is. The source points out, look, what's the dominant mining activity on the planet? Fossil fuels. We dig up or pump out 2.5 billion tons of oil every single year, just for transport.
2.5 billion tons.
Yearly.
Yearly. Now compare that. The source says that amount is somewhere between 4,000 and 10,000 times more than the combined total of the three main metals used in all the batteries globally today.
4,000 to 10,000 times. That puts it in perspective. Doesn't it just? And here's the kicker, according to the source. Those 2.5 billion tons of oil extracted every year, burned, turned mostly into CO2 that goes into the atmosphere forever. Over 10 years, that's 25 billion tons dug up just for gas and diesel.
Okay.
Battery materials, extracted once. And then at the end of the battery's life, maybe 10 years, typically those materials must be recycled. It's designed to be circular in a way fossil fuels just aren't.
Plus, the source mentions efficiency.
The huge point. Electric cars use 4 times less energy to go the same distance. That's straight from the source.
And the electricity itself is getting cleaner.
Exactly. The source notes places like Europe, Italy, already nearing 50% renewable electricity. Gasoline and diesel, never renewable.
So, given all that data from the source, why does the mining for EV batteries create such a fuss in this counter-narrative while the, vastly larger ongoing fossil fuel extraction gets a pass?
Well, the source offers a pretty compelling reason. Fossil fuels mostly become CO2. It's colorless, odorless, completely imperceptible to us. It's a subtle waste, as the source puts it.
You don't see it.
You don't see it, you don't smell it. But it's destabilizing the climate. Every kilo of gasoline burned releases 3 kilos of CO2 out the tailpipe. But because it's invisible, it feels abstract, less tangible than digging metal out of the ground for a battery you can hold.
And the source takes it beyond just the environment, too.
Yes.
Talks about geopolitics, economics.
Right. 80% of oil moves transport. That flow cannot be interrupted under the current system. And the source is blunt. That's where we've had wars over oil for more than 70 years. And think about the money. The source talks about rivers of money from oil enriching just a few people, dynasties, who then buy up industries, banks, football teams, huge events.
Right.
So the source concludes, moving away from this slavery to fossil fuels means everything to gain. And yet somehow millions are convinced the old gasoline engine should last forever after 150 years. It's just a baffling flip in the story as the source lays it out.
Okay, let's look at another narrative the source challenges. Calls it a pataka, which is like a fake, a hoax.
Yeah, basically. The idea that this whole climate thing is just China's fault because they burn coal.
Right, you hear that a lot.
But the source says comparing total emissions is just misleading. China's population is huge. 4 times the U.S., 17 times Germany, 25 times Italy.
So you have to compare per person.
Exactly. Unless, the source says kind of dryly, you think people in populous countries should just live in shacks.
Fair point. So per person, looking at all fossil fuels, oil, coal, gas, what's the picture?
The source's data shows China's per capita use is way less than some others, like 1/3 of Saudi Arabia's, half of the U.S. or Australia's, a bit less than Germany, only a bit more than Italy. so that it's all China line just doesn't hold up on a per-person basis.
And what about the historical emissions? The source says that's what really counts for climate change.
Crucial point. Because CO2 hangs around for over a century, the source explains. So emissions from way back when are still up there, still causing warming.
Okay.
And if you look at cumulative emissions per person over the last 150 years, China's total is 1/3 of the European Union's. 1/3.
Wow. And the source mentioned a great trick, too.
Yeah, industrial localization. Think about the device you might be listening on right now.
Okay.
Probably made in China, right? So the emissions from making it counted against China. But the device, the energy it uses day to day, that's consumed somewhere else. The source calls it emission shifting. You count it where it's made, not where it's used.
So the source really uses that data, per capita, cumulative consumption, to dismantle that simple blame China narrative.
Pretty effectively, yeah.
Which brings us back to that idea that the energy transition itself is the scam. The source kind of flips that idea on its head, doesn't it?
It does. This is maybe the core message from the source. The energy transition is a gigantic scam, but only if we don't do it.
If we don't do it.
If we don't do it, the source basically says we're completely screwed. Siamo fregati was the phrase used, I think.
And they put numbers on it.
Yeah.
Changing the energy system costs trillions, takes time, huge effort. We know that.
But, and this is the source's key point, not doing it, costs way more, up to 6 times more, according to the data presented.
6 times. And that cost isn't abstract.
Not at all. The source says that cost comes from the actual physical damages climate change will cause to our lives, our infrastructure, our industries, through all those extreme weather events we're seeing more of.
And the human cost.
Yeah. The source says we can all imagine it, but adds that some people, even in places like Italy, are already living it, losing jobs, homes, due to floods, extreme droughts.
Right.
And while the source notes the burden usually hits the poorest and most fragile hardest,
There's a twist.
there's a crucial twist for the listener, for you. The source says, this time, among the most fragile are you because the future is more at risk than the present. That instability, those costs, they eventually reach everyone.
So what really comes through from this source material is this huge clash, isn't it? Between a story that's simple, scary, but tells you, don't worry, don't change.
Right. The easy narrative.
And this complex reality, backed by data, evidence, showing the real danger, is actually in not changing.
And the source's final message is really a call to, well, be discerning. Be careful who's feeding you that easy story. It really urges you, the listener, to do the work. Study, dig deeper than the headlines, think critically about what's happening.
And it leaves us with some really vital, provocative questions to keep asking ourselves, doesn't it?
It does. Like, let's never tire of asking ourselves questions. And maybe, do we really believe we live in the best possible world right now?
Yeah. Or that last one, which really cuts right to it. Do we think it's up to someone else to do something about all this? And not up to me or to you? Food for thought, definitely.